You know that feeling? You've just walked away from a conversation feeling inexplicably drained or maybe just kind of small, and you really can't put your finger on why. You replay the words in your head and, well, nothing sounds outright offensive, but that heavy feeling is definitely still there. What you've just experienced is the subtle current of hidden psychological forces. These are literally the invisible mechanics controlling our interactions every single day. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the hidden psychology that's running our everyday lives. We are going to completely pull back the curtain on the subtle cues, the biological impulses, and the deeply ingrained cognitive biases that dictate exactly how we speak, how we listen, and how we connect, or, fail to connect with the people around us. Here is our roadmap for this journey. Think of it as a map taking us from the observable surface right down to our deep subconscious drivers. We're covering the subtle signals of arrogance, silence as structural authority, the chameleon effect of mirroring, dealing with psychological friction, and finally, the loss aversion trap. Let's get into it. Layer number 1, subtle signals of arrogance, and how everyday language actually leaks superiority. So, psychologists point out that interpersonal arrogance rarely shows up as these giant, cartoonish insults. Instead, it hides in a mix of entitlement and low empathy. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the contrast. Take the phrase, "actually, it's like this." On the surface, sure, it sounds like a minor correction. But in a conversation, that word "actually" is a quiet power move. You're appointing yourself the room's official fact-checker, which instantly makes the listener defensive. Now, contrast that with, here is another way to look at it. This is an empathetic alternative. It keeps the door open to discussion without slamming it shut with quiet superiority. And there are a few more of these quiet culprits we use all the time. Saying everyone knows that instantly creates this in-group and out-group dynamic, shoving the listener to the outside. "I'm just built different" completely strips away the value of hard work and implies this kind of magical superiority. "You wouldn't understand" straight up treats the listener as fundamentally incapable. And it's not that hard. That one completely erases someone's invisible effort. Recognizing these phrases is absolutely crucial. It's the very first step to actually speaking with care. Okay, moving to section 2. Silence as structural authority. This is arguably the most underused communication tool out there. Let's dive below the surface words into the nonverbal realm. Communication advisor Kevin Abdurrahman has this incredible framework arguing that deliberate silence is the ultimate signal of genuine structural authority. A secure leader doesn't rush to fill dead air out of anxiety. Instead, they use a concrete mental checklist. There's the opening silence, held just a beat longer than expected to gather the room. The post-statement silence, which lets a heavy decision really settle in. The challenge reception silence, the response ending silence, where you literally just stop talking instead of nervously adding filler. And the thinking silence, where you take the time to genuinely ponder a question without apologizing for the pause. So why does this work so well? Well, it's biology. When you receive a challenge in genuine silence, it physically reduces the amygdala's threat signal in the brain and activates the social engagement system. You are biologically communicating to the other person that you've heard their challenge and are holding it securely rather than just anxiously trying to manage or deflect it. It is a wildly powerful dynamic. All right, on to layer 3, mirroring, the chameleon effect, and the subconscious imitation of gestures. Now we're looking at an involuntary physical synchronization. This dates all the way back to early human evolutionary survival. By definition, the chameleon effect is the behavior in which one person subconsciously imitates the gesture, speech pattern, or attitude of another. What is so fascinating here is that this empathetic mechanism begins in early infancy. Babies literally mimic their parents' facial expressions to establish a concept of self and to feel validated in their emotions. It's totally hardwired into how we learn to connect. Let's look at how this adapts across different environments. In social bonding, mirroring naturally increases cohesion. In power dynamics, lower status individuals will often subconsciously mirror higher status people just to gain favor. And in job interviews, it has a massive impact. There's this famous study by Word, Zana, and Cooper that showed when interviewers used distant, cold body language, the interviewees unknowingly mirrored that distance and actually performed worse. Our bodies are constantly, silently reacting to the environment around us. Down to section 4 now.
dealing with psychological friction, the internal resistance to authentic expression.
We are plunging into the deep subconscious drivers now. When we try to shift from a comfortable habit to a healthier one, we often hit this incredibly heavy internal drag. So the crucial point is captured perfectly in the phrase, the kinetic energy of stasis. I know it sounds like an oxymoron, right? But it perfectly describes the immense, invisible effort our sense of self exerts just to maintain a familiar, even if painful, emotional equilibrium. It takes a massive amount of energy to stay stuck. This friction shows up in a few key ways in the real world. Shame-based resistance happens when a desire hits a brick wall of internalized guilt. Vulnerability avoidance is basically your brain throwing up a massive shield to stop potential emotional injury. Then there's the knowledge-action gap. We've all been there, when you know exactly what the right choice is, but you just can't make yourself do it. And finally, self-objectification suppressing natural joy. Look, if you've ever wondered why setting a perfectly reasonable, simple boundary with a partner can feel physically exhausting, this friction is the exact reason why. You are literally fighting your own programming. And this feeling isn't just a metaphor, guys. It is a measurable biopsychosocial conflict. It's a literal neural battle going on inside your head between your prefrontal cortex, which is up there trying to execute a logical plan, and your limbic system, which is just screaming in fear and survival mode. That's why psychological friction produces real physical symptoms. It's why you get a racing heart, shallow breathing, or tense muscles right before a tough conversation. And finally, Section 5, the loss aversion trap, evolutionary biology and cognitive bias. We are officially sinking into the deepest layer of our cognitive wiring to explore Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky's famous prospect theory. Just look at this number, 2. I want you to remember this, because empirically, our brains treat losses as if they were exactly twice as large as equivalent gains. The psychological pain of losing $50 is literally twice as intense as the joy of finding $50. It fundamentally skews how we communicate, how we negotiate, and how we make everyday choices. So why on earth are we wired this way? Well, it all comes down to evolutionary mathematics. For an early human operating right on the edge of survival, the loss of a day's food could quite literally cause death. But gaining an extra day's food, that wouldn't necessarily guarantee an extra day of life. So organisms that treated threats as vastly more urgent than opportunities just had a way better chance of surviving and passing on their genes. But wait, there is actually an ongoing modern debate around this concept. While traditional loss aversion sits on one side, newer research by Yachiam and Hochman proposes this idea of loss attention. They argue that losses don't necessarily carry more subjective weight, but rather they dramatically spike our autonomic arousal and our general attention. Essentially, a potential loss simply forces us to pay much closer, highly focused attention to the task at hand. And this invisible force? It scales perfectly across our entire world. In marketing, trial periods leverage this by making you feel like you're losing something if you cancel your subscription. We even experience expectation-based loss aversion, like that very real, very annoying frustration you feel when an item you intended to buy is suddenly out of stock. And get this, experiments show that capuchin monkeys exhibit the exact same loss-averse trading behaviors as we humans do. No way, right? It is a primal instinct woven seamlessly into our modern decisions. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to really think about. From the subtle arrogance hiding in our words, to the silent authority we project, the mirroring of our bodies, and the deep evolutionary fears steering our choices, we are constantly operating under massive unseen forces. So I'll ask you this. Next time you speak, will you just be blindly reacting to that internal friction, or will you be consciously choosing your reflection? Take that with you into your next conversation. Thank you so much for watching, and keep questioning the invisible forces around you.